Federal Fusion 357 Magnum versus 44 Magnum. I'm going to use my 4-inch Smith & Wesson revolvers to do this test. My 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686 and 357 Magnum. Technically it's 4 1/8 inch. And my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson Model 69, technically that's 4 1/4 inch. To see what we get with 357 Magnum and 44 Magnum with our Federal Fusion. Now this stuff is listed as hunting ammunition, but I'm going to test it as if it were a self-defense cartridge. It's also listed as a bonded soft point, but there are clearly sort of hollow points in there, and some of the literature suggests you get expansion with these. So I've been curious about these for a really long time. Our 357 Magnum is a 158 grain rated at 1240 feet per second through a 4-inch revolver. And our 44 Magnum is a 240 grain soft point rated at 1290 feet per second, again through a 4-inch revolver. Kind of interesting that their test barrels are 4 inches. So we'll see what we get out of my 4-inch revolver. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So our first shot's going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential we have for possible hollow point expansion and all of that and penetration. Then I'm going to do more of a real world simulation after that, where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we're going to have a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard here to represent hitting ribs or sternum. Then 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting back ribs. And that'll be more of our real world simulation. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of flesh. So 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inch pectoral muscle. And then 8 inches of flesh after that. So it's really like simulating 9.5 inches and then back ribs. So we'll do a plain clear ballistics shot and then a real world simulation shot, and then I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 357 Magnum 158 grain soft point rated at 1240 feet per second. About 5 yards from the target. Let's see what I get. See how close I get to 1240 feet per second. 1266. 1192. 1237. 1219. 1206. So I'd say a little bit below that rated velocity, but pretty close. 44 Magnum 240 grain. We are rated at 1290 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. Let's see how close I get to 1290 feet per second. $12.44. $11.64. $11.65. $12.13. 1202. So quite a bit below the rated velocity. In their test barrel's a 4-inch V barrel. I'm using a 4 1/4 inch barrel. So they seem to always want to do this. Load the 44 Magnum less than what they claim. But it's still relatively powerful for what it is. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these two compare. All right, first up our 357 Magnum into plain clear ballistics. I did put up a blanket backstop up there because I have absolutely no idea how far these things are going to penetrate, because they look a lot like hollow points that are kind of filled in. I've seen that with soft point ammo before, so I'm not sure if we'll get expansion or if it'll just go real deep. I'm not sure. 357 Magnum, see what this does. All right. 44 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, I'm rather surprised there because I was thinking these things were going to simply go all the way through this block, but it does appear that they are simply hollow points that are filled in a little bit, because I do see expanded petals sticking out with that 44 Magnum and the 357 Magnum as well. So these things energy dumped quite well in that first 3-inch piece here. 357 Magnum on the bottom, 44 on top. Really good energy dump overall. And all the tearing and everything I'm seeing here is very comparable to hollow points, maybe even greater than some hollow points. But what I am seeing that's interesting is it looks like it gets the damage of a hollow point, but stays in a straighter line and goes just a little bit deeper than a typical hollow point. So our 357 Magnum, lots of great damage going on there and tearing and cutting. And we went to about 21.5 inches of penetration. That's not too bad. It's over penetration for self-defense a little bit, but it's not too bad. Now when we look at our 44 Magnum, camera parallax might alter this view a little bit, but we are right there about 23.25 inches. So for being a 44 Magnum, that's actually not too bad overall, because it did dump a ton of its energy. Even if it passed through an attacker, I think, you know, it wouldn't have much energy on the backside of that, and it did a ton of damage. So let's do our real world simulation with denim on the front here and rib simulations, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of denim followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting back ribs, and then more clear ballistics. So let's see how our 357 Magnum does in our real world simulation. All right, let me set that all back up and we'll hit it with the 44 Magnum. All right, real world simulation, 44 mag. Let's see what this does. Let's go take a look. All right, so luckily we landed on the back of that block there so that we could still see what's going on. A little bit less energy dump after going through that denim, but it's still really, really good. And then we hit our pectoral muscle here, and then we hit our rib simulation, our first one. Interesting here is our 357 Magnum is kind of keyholing through there a little bit, as where our 44 Magnum is going in a perfectly straight line going through that first rib simulation. And then we have a little bit of arcing around there with our 357 Magnum, as where our 44 went in a straighter line, did more damage. It did bust off one of those petals right here at about 11.5, 12 inches. And they both went through our back rib simulation right here, and our 357 Magnum was tumbling. Our 44 Magnum just went straight through, nice, powerfully straight through with an expanded hollow point. So it definitely looks like we have a good advantage here with our 44 Magnum. So our damage is pretty good with our 357 Magnum still, and our penetration is pretty similar to what we had before. Our total track goes to about 20.5 inches, which I think is about an inch less than what we had in plain gel, and pretty similar difference there with our 44 Magnum. We went to about 22 inches. So, you know, our 44 Magnum is definitely more consistent. Our 357 was consistent as far as its penetration goes, but not as consistent when it comes to that expansion. So looking at this, clearly our 44 Magnum is a better choice here out of these two. That being said, recoil was quite a bit greater with that 44 Magnum, so maybe it's not such a good choice if an average person like me can't control it very well, shooting rapidly like in a self-defense situation. So we will find that out. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at these. Then I'm going to shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these on steel. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 357 Magnum and our 44 Magnum. These are obviously hollow points that were just filled in to look like a soft point. 357 Magnum through plain gel, fantastic expansion. Looks quite good overall. Now our 44 Magnum, huge expansion. It held together quite well for the energies it's working with. However, you can see right here how some of these petals want to kind of break, and we saw some break off going through our real world simulation. So going through our real world simulation, things change up a lot, but even worse with our 357 Magnum. Our 357 Magnum, that altered that performance a whole lot. Terrible expansion. It looks like it tumbled through once it expanded part of that nose there, and just kind of tumbled through and created a good amount of damage because the bullet is a long bullet while it's tumbling through. Not terrible performance in that regard, but as far as, you know, statistical performance of getting certain amounts of expansion, that did pretty bad. Our 44 Magnum, while this was definitely affected quite a bit by that rib simulation, and we busted off at least one petal there, we still had enough expansion that I would say I would count this as decent expansion for what it is. But also, you know, because it didn't expand huge, we also had really good penetration. So that's really what makes it a good general purpose 44 Magnum. So not terrible performance with our 44 Magnum. With our 357 Magnum, it's kind of half and half. Okay in plain gel, but real world simulation, not so great. So our 44 Magnum is definitely a little bit better with this type of bullet design. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I'm going to obviously shoot these things double action. Sometimes people look at my chronographing sessions and be like, you only shot single action, you got to be a man and shoot double action. And my response is, I'm not an idiot. I don't want to like jerk that shot and shoot an expensive chronograph, so I'd rather look like less of a man and do single action. But when I'm shooting at the target, it doesn't matter. And I am wearing a glove here because that 44 Magnum shoots out a lot of debris out that cylinder gap. Not something I'd really think about in a self-defense situation or even feel, but knowing that I'll feel it out here on the range, I want to take that out of the equation, any flinch. So 357 Magnum, 14 yards from the target. Gonna get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target. So 357 Mag, let's see how I can do with this. Not bad overall. 44 Magnum, let's see what this does. I would not want to be that guy, that's for sure. That hit a lot harder. Let me back it up and see how these would do as hunting rounds. All right, 40 yards from the target. Interestingly enough, when I did hunt deer, I actually took several from 40 yards. It was roughly 40 yards. I was using rifles and shotguns, never hit one with a handgun, but you know, not a bad distance if you're going to simulate hunting. But I'm not really simulating hunting necessarily, because I am going to shoot double action, and it's kind of like, you know, an intermediate, you know, dick and drill versus hunting scenario, 40 yards. Just see what I can do with these. So 357 Mag, let's see what this will do. All right, I hit them all, but not great, because I did pull one pretty low down there. 44 Mag, let's see how I do with this. Oh. Definitely hits that a lot harder. I did pull one over the top, so I got just a few rounds left. I'll sling some from 75 yards, single action, just for fun, and then we'll talk about this ammo. All right, 75 yards from the target, I'm going to try to do a hunting scenario. 4-inch revolvers are definitely something I would not want to hunt with, but I could see this as being sort of a SHTF situation, especially with the fact that I only have 3 rounds of each of these calibers left. So it's kind of like, I got a 4-inch revolver, I got 3 rounds I found Federal Fusion and I see a deer and I'm hungry. So I'll see what I can do, see if I can hit the target with these from 75 yards. I'll try to make center mass shots the best I can. So 357 mag. See how I can do with this. Well, I'm going away hungry. I don't know how I missed that. Aiming perfectly center. So these are hitting high left because I aimed a little bit low and to the right. 44 Magnum. Let's see how I can do with this. I'd rather have this if I was hunting for sure. More likely to do the job. Again, way over the target. These are definitely hitting high. I had to aim basically at the base or a little bit below the target to hit. And those were hitting pretty high. But at least I got roughly the same accuracy with both of those. So looking at this test, very interesting ammo overall. I'm going to say for what it is, it's actually not that bad. However, I'm going to say you definitely could get better 357 Magnum than this. Nothing really stands out with this. The fact that we had, especially because of the fact that we didn't get very good expansion through that second shot. I don't like to see that, especially with something with 357 Magnum through a 4-inch barrel. You can do better than that. That being said, it wasn't that bad. Without the rib simulation, it expanded pretty well, and we had pretty good penetration and damage regardless of whether it expanded great or not. Our 44 Magnum, this is actually really, really good for what it is, because a lot of times hollow points that are made for self-defense actually penetrate more than this, but these still penetrated pretty well. So I would say as a general purpose 44 Magnum, you want a woods round that you're going to walk in the woods if you are concerned about bears and cougars and whatnot, but you also want to keep that same load in your gun for a general purpose self-defense cartridge. I'm going to say this 44 Magnum is quite good for that. Recoil was pretty harsh, but it was pretty average recoil for 44 Magnum. So for what it is, I'm going to say that 44 Magnum is a pretty good choice, at least for a 4-inch revolver, for just a general purpose 44 Magnum. It's not bad at all. Our 357 Magnum wasn't bad, but the difference here is I would recommend and say, hey, this 44, if you're looking for something like that, woods or self-defense, pretty good. As where I would not be recommending this 357 Magnum. With that, I'd say, well, it's okay. It's better than nothing. It's better than some, but you could probably do better off with like a Federal HST 154 grain hollow point, something like that, because that penetrates quite well also. So interesting test today. So tell me what you guys think. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.